Welcome to the Byrne-Wheeler Report. We're recording this on February 1st, 2026. In this episode, we'll discuss Intel's fourth quarter 2025 earnings, the Panther Lake launch, and Neurophos, interesting startup, recently raised capital to do optical compute. And then we'll finish up by discussing the new Microsoft Maya 200 I almost said network processor, Bob. AI accelerator, also known as an NPU. So, um, why don't I kick it off here? The thing that struck me with Intel earnings was somehow they managed to have gross margins below 40% and be capacity constrained at the same time. You would think that you could do one or the other, but not both. If you're capacity constrained, you should be able to raise prices. They're in kind of an awkward position there. Did you take a look at the earnings, Bob?
I didn't spend a lot of time going through it, but I mean, the initial reaction was, of course, due to their first quarter outlook and the fact they were going to be capacity constrained in the first quarter, and so that hit. But as I went through the transcript, the thing that jumped out at me was some of the discussion around yields on 18A, and then on 14A we still seem to be in this kind of holding pattern until second half.
Right. On the 14A, I think the issue is that Lip-Bu Tan wants to see significant customer traction before they commit to outfitting fabs and capacity expansion. But they're making progress in developing the process and characterizing it and developing the design kit for it.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed the PDK they talked about was 0.5, and they're kind of talking about customers getting to the point of doing test chips. So it still seems like it's quite a long ways from meaningful customer commitments.
That's fair. And then was there anything about the 18A yields, anything specific you're thinking about there?
Yeah, so I mean, they didn't give a hard number, but what jumped out at me when in the discussion about the yields was Lip-Bu said, on the yield improvement, which we see in the 7 to 8% per month range. So they're seeing pretty dramatic yield improvements on 18A, it sounds like. I mean, 7 to 8% per month.
We assume that's just 7 or 8 points. But like on the glass half empty, that means they're not at like 90%, right? Because there are that many times you can go to the 7 to 8%.
He's made it clear that they're not to the what he called the industry leading standard yet, meaning they can't match TSMC yields. But they're
it's
clearly
a
making
complicated
progress.
process. It's one of the first to use gate all-around technology. It's the first 18 angstrom process. It's the first to have backside power. So they implemented a lot of changes in this single node here. So they make their life difficult to achieve that level of progress, right? They have a lot of
Absolutely
factors coming in. The other thing that reads on yield is they talked about Panther Lake's profitability, gross profit margin being dilutive, so less than the corporate average. And Panther Lake is a multi-tile PC processor, of which the compute tile and in certain SKUs the GPU tile are fabbed in 18A.
Yeah, so it's the first production vehicle. And I noticed that Lip-Bu is talking about Panther Lake as a customer. So they're very much looking at internal customers for the foundry. They're not it's just a different way of looking at the internal relationships than the traditional kind of vertically integrated Intel.
Yeah, I think that's actually a step forward, because that was the whole point of separating the two operations, was to have more of a customer-supplier relationship and hope that drives some efficiency and aligns incentives better. The other 18A product was that they've talked about for a long time was Clearwater Forest. And I was looking at the earnings call transcript, and there was one question about Clearwater Forest, and it was more or less dodged. Lip-Bu did not utter the words Clearwater Forest in his answer. So that had been on the schedule to be the next product that's The Xeon processor made up of their efficiency cores, and it would have large caches, so it would be well suited to workloads where you were more memory bound than compute bound. Instead, he talked more about Diamond Rapids, which is the next performance core Xeon, and its successor, Coral Rapids.
The other thing is, I didn't look to see if there was any mention of the next gen data center GPU.
He did make mention to a few different things. One was he alluded to an x86 with fixed function and programmable accelerators, and that was in the context of AI. So maybe there's a product concept that hasn't been disclosed, where they combine both styles of processing, and that might be well suited to inference workloads, particularly smaller models for enterprises. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they come up with.
Yeah, I guess also noticeable by its absence is Gaudi. There's zero mention now of Gaudi.
Right. I don't think we'll ever hear Gaudi mentioned again. They did talk about their ASIC business, however, and their custom packaging business. So those are doing much better than I was expecting. So I think that's probably why they brought it up, that they're pleased with the progress there. Specifically looking at my notes here, the ASIC business proper was up 50% year over year and 26% quarter on quarter. And for packaging, it's coming on stronger than they expected. And they talk about engagements being in the size of $1 billion each. So that side of the business is going well. And I think there have been some companies who've talked about using the EMIB silicon bridge technology in some of their future products.
Yeah, I do recall seeing EMIB mentioned, and of course, CoWoS capacity at TSMC is sort of a limiting factor right now in terms of the ability to build mostly XPUs, right? And so EMIB provides an alternative to.
And also there's some political pressure, I think, for U.S. companies to source from U.S. suppliers. And this is a way to make people applying that pressure happy, because companies can go and say, hey, well, we're working with Intel and we're having our chips assembled there using this technology. I suspect your average politician doesn't really understand front end versus back end manufacturing when it comes to semiconductors.
Yeah, nor do they care in terms of the optics.
Right. And so that's another positive for Intel. Going back to the capacity issue, so one reason why the sales are going to go down in Q1 relative to Q4 was that they depleted inventory in Q4. So that's, again, a double-edged sword. It means they had a lot of inventory, which generally isn't considered a positive thing. And so having depleted that, they have fewer resources to meet demand in Q1. And they also talked about ratcheting down slightly CapEx, but increasing capacity. And they would do that by using the CapEx that they are spending on tooling versus on building more clean room space. So increasing the capacity of existing fabs. And the capacity...
Yeah, I did notice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed they said that wafer starts or total wafer output had increased across everything from 7 nanometer down, basically.
7/10, 3, which is what I think Granite Rapids is on, and 18A, which is Panther Lake and the future Xeon. So yeah, they have to build all that out. And then, of course, when the yields go up on 18A, that's effectively a capacity expansion. And then with regards to Panther Lake, I looked at some of the online reviews of it. Now, those are going to be biased toward the PC enthusiast audience, but there are some interesting observations. One is performance is good, particularly on the graphics side with the 12 compute unit GPU version, which is the large GPU, which happens to be the GPU made by TSMC. It seems that Intel Design did a really good job executing on this particular product, and also the efficiency, and that's chalked up to the advantages of the 18A process. The power efficiency compared to Intel's predecessor, so let's say Arrow Lake or perhaps Lunar Lake, is much better. So, the process, the 18A process in terms of what it brings to the table looks really positive.
Yeah, and clearly, as you point out, and includes new technologies that are getting proven in advance of 14A, and so sets the stage for 14A. But
yeah, the big change with A, aside from the smaller dimension, is the use of high NA EUV. So that is it is a big change where they're going to use a different tool to build the transistors and the finer features. So that's how they get from 18 to 14 is this new technology. So that could present some challenges, but I'm hoping I'm hoping for the sake of Intel that everything they've learned bringing up 18A and ramping production will carry through to 14A, and we'll see. Hi, you've been watching a segment from a longer Byrne-Wheeler report discussion. To watch the preceding segment, please click up here. To watch the next one, please click over here. You can subscribe by clicking this round orb, and to see another video in our series, please click down here.